Hello students, Mr. Peterson here, and we are going to be talking today about story and the plot line of a story. For today's lesson, you're going to need your writer's notebook and a pencil, and when we use our writer's notebook, I would like you to make sure that you turn it sideways, like this, so it is landscaped. The title of today's lesson that you could write on the red line at the top of your page is Story Plot Lines with today's date. Thank you. Today's lesson is going to focus on a basic plot line, and we're going to talk about what a basic plot line looks like, and we're going to talk about some vocabulary terms that we want to make sure we know in class, so that way when we talk about our plot line, we can all use the same type of language and know what we're referring to when someone asks you about a specific part of your story. So a basic plot line really just looks like this, and many of you have seen this. You may have heard it called a story mountain or a variety of other terms, but we're going to use the term basic plot line. So it basically has this characteristics, and that's your ending, and then that's kind of what it's going to look like. So if you see this drawn on a board in any form, this is really kind of going to be talking about the same thing, the basic plot line of your story. So in order to talk intelligently about our story, we need to know some vocabulary words, so we're all speaking the same language. The first term we need to know is exposition. The exposition of the story is the beginning of the story, and it's where you get to know your character, who they are, the setting, where this is going to be taking place, and also our conflict starts to get introduced, or the problem of our story. The exposition is going to be always given in this beginning area of the story. The next important term for us to know is conflict. The conflict of the story is the problem the main character is going to be dealing with. And in a short story that we're going to be writing, it'll be about a social issue. And you'll find out what that problem is going to be for your main character. The conflict of your story is always going to want to be brought up here in this beginning area of your plot line. And that brings us to the rising action of the story. The rising action, as you can read here, shows the problem your character faces. And you've already been introduced to this a little bit right after the exposition, and then it gets into telling the events of the story in the order they happen. It gets more exciting as the story moves along. Your rising action is going to come in to your story along this area here of your plot line. And it'll be a series of events done in linear order or in time order of as they would occur. And as you move along, these events are probably building some more suspense or getting you closer to some of the higher action points of your story. And this brings us to the climax of the story. This is what we're reading for. This is the turning point in the story. This is the most exciting part. The character faces the problem here. The character, ends up seeing the bully. They end up dealing with the issue head on. They have to be confronted right with this issue they're dealing with, and we've got to try and figure out what are they going to do to figure this out and solve it, and how's it going to turn around in the story and change. The climax is going to happen right here at the top of the storyline, or the plot line, and then lead us on towards our completion. The completion of our story is called the resolution. The end of the story where the problem ends up being solved and the writer wraps things up. When we say solved, it doesn't mean that everything has a nice little bow wrapped up on it, because you can think of many stories we've read in class, such as On the Bridge by Todd Strasser, where solved isn't the best term maybe, because you're still left to think and you're left to figure out what you think may end up occurring towards the end, but the writer really drops some hints and explains in a way that makes you kind of figure out what's going to happen without simply telling you what's going to happen. This is not where you see the words "the end" and things don't wrap up perfectly like oftentimes you would have heard in fantasy fairy tales and stuff you would have heard as a kid. But it's wrapped up and we're brought to a point where we can finish the story. The resolution obviously takes place in this last area of the story until we're done. A really good example for us to look at, so we have a concrete example in our mind of a linear, simple, basic plot structure is On the Bridge by Todd Strasser. We share this in class and we've read this together. And it starts right out with that awesome line about Adam saying he beat this guy up at the mall yesterday, and they're talking and they're on the bridge together, and Adam and Seth are hanging out, and you see how Seth's trying to be cool right away, and they're talking about things immediately in the story. So we get right into knowing who these characters are a little bit and what's going on. As the story moves along, we have some events that are taking place in the order that they would normally happen, as when the girls are driving under the bridge and Adam waves to them and he thinks about like maybe they'll come off the throughway and drive up onto the bridge and they'll be able to hang out together, and Seth gets nervous about that, being around girls that would be older than him. The next event in our story comes when Adam and Seth have the truck go by, and Adam gets the trucker to kind of honk his horn at him, and then Seth wants to try it and be cool, and things don't quite work out, and he's bummed about it. And as we move along in the story, if you recall, Adam is getting more and more bold with what he's doing on the bridge, and he finally does some stuff that really didn't make any sense, and he threw his cigarette butt on this car that was going by, and all of a sudden here's the guys in the bridge getting out of the car to confront the boys about what they're doing there. And here is the conflict. So all the things Adam done on the bridge had been getting more and more aggressive and bad choices being made, until finally he made a very bad choice, and our action rose and built. And now we're at the climax of our story. Which brings us, as you know, to our resolution. The resolution at the end, which, like I said, isn't wrapped up in the nice tiny bow of Seth learned that. It's simply left with, you got to figure out what Seth is thinking a little bit. He looks at the jacket, he thinks, this could be pretty cool after he got beat up and it's bloody and stuff. And then he decides that he was going to take it off and throw it in the garbage can. And there we have it. It's wrapped up and we're done, and our resolution is finished. And this, boys and girls, brings us back to the look of our basic plot line. As a quick review, check your notes, make sure you've got the right stuff here. We have the exposition, where the beginning of the story is going on, our characters are setting, and we start figuring out what this conflict is taking place right over here in the beginning. We have our conflict, which gets really introduced, where we start figuring out what the problem's going to be this character's dealing with. We have rising action, like Seth and Adam on the bridge doing some things that were less than smart, and it got more and more daring as they went till the cigarette butt got thrown, which brought us to our climax in the story, where the big kids in that car get out and they get into a fight. And then we get our resolution, where we found out how Adam kind of deals with it and solves his own issues. So, basic plot line, when we talk in class and use these terms, we have to know them. We have to make sure we're prepared to discuss these with each other, as well as understand what your teacher is talking to you about. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let's be ready for class tomorrow. And in your next lesson we'll do this way, you'll be able to look at some more sophisticated plot lines instead of just a basic plot line as a writer. And we'll show you some other stories that can show you what a sophisticated structure would look like. Thank you, guys. See you tomorrow.